Good evening. It is time for today's Tax Talk. I'm your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. It is Wednesday, February 16th, the year of our Lord 2022. And the pandemic moratoriums have come to an end. And many people had missed their mortgages, and so the foreclosure rate is going up, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Won't you join us? No, that's right. Well, people, I know, but Attorney Leahy, this is today's Tax Talk. What are we going to talk about foreclosures for? Well, what people don't, you may not know, I'm sure you don't, is when I started getting into helping people with taxes because of foreclosures. Well, how did that work, you might ask? Well, in 2008, I was helping people with bankruptcies. And I was helping a lot of people with Chapter 13, so people who were behind in their mortgages. And I would help them save their home through Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Well, one of the ways that what would happen is I would help people in the foreclosure case because they were facing foreclosure, and that was my marketing list, was people in foreclosures. And so I would market to the people in foreclosures and try to help them with a bankruptcy. In 2008, a lot of things changed because the foreclosures went through the roof. And, before 2008, I really never saw anybody I had one client that got a loan modification, and it's because she had cancer and she had missed some payments while she was getting cancer treatment. And she went back to work, and the bank was kind enough to take what she owed and add it to the amount and rework her mortgage. Her payment actually went up, but not that much. That was the only time I had ever seen a loan modification. Every other time it either went to foreclosure and a sale auction, or people saved their home through foreclosure. Or through Chapter 13 bankruptcy, or because before 2008 the market was rising. And so you could sell your home and maybe make a profit or get out without losing and facing a deficiency. So that's another way a lot of people did that, and I help people do that. I did a lot of short sales. And now after 2008, because before 2008 really wasn't a lot of short sales because the home's value was going up so quickly that most of the time people had equity in the home, and that's why they would look to sell. Or they would do a Chapter 13. After 2008, things changed. What really changed was the type of people who were facing foreclosures. Here it was, everyone, especially small business people who were in business for themselves. And so I started helping people, targeting my, because there were so many, I didn't just send it out to everybody in the foreclosure list. I started targeting zip codes, and those zip codes were mostly people who were in business for themselves. And I found out that many people who were facing foreclosures were also behind in their taxes because business was bad. Usually, if the last thing you want to do is not pay your mortgage or not pay the tax man. Right? These are the two things you don't want to avoid. One thing being behind in your credit card debt or your car payment or these other things, but even your car payment, they can come take your car away from you. So one thing to be behind in your credit card, another thing to be behind in your mortgage, and quite another, and then the same with the IRS. And so this is what got me helping people with IRS problems during the foreclosure. So I know a lot about foreclosure here in Illinois, and I've helped a lot of people. Well, we've heard a lot about what's going on during the pandemic. A lot of people, and I think there's some numbers in here, and maybe we'll some of these articles we're going to review are going to reveal this. But many people went into what they call a forbearance agreement. And a forbearance agreement is an agreement between you and the mortgage company that you can miss some payments without a penalty. And so a lot of what happened almost immediately, and I was a big advocate for people getting into forbearance agreements because we didn't know what was going to happen, and many people weren't working for many months, right? We had the total shutdown, and many businesses shut down, and nobody was making any money, and you couldn't pay your mortgage. And a lot of people who own companies didn't have any income. Now, the government tried to offset that by the PPP program and make sure people didn't lose their paychecks. But in the meantime, they didn't have any money, because it took some time for the PPP money to come through. So that's what the forbearance agreement was. Now, many people who got into a forbearance agreement, they caught up, and this is a very likely scenario. When it came time, the mortgage company asked, well, can you pay the back amount up in full? Because, right, the forbearance agreement said, well, and at first it was 3 months. We're going to give you 3 months, but on the fourth month, you have to make 4 payments. So if my mortgage payment is $2,000, now I don't have to pay that for 3 months, but on the fourth month, I have to pay $8,000. Well, if I was having some problems with cash flow, that wasn't going to happen. And so many of the mortgage companies automatically extended it to 6 months, and then 9 months, and then a year, and then more, 15 months, 18 months. And many people were in for 18 months. Well, after 18 months, the chance of me paying that in a lump sum were not very good. And so the mortgage companies started agreeing to what they call loan modifications. And a loan modification is when you agree to change. A parties to a contract, and that's what a mortgage is, a parties to a contract can always agree to change the terms of that contract. So a mortgage modification may change the interest rate. It may change the duration of the loan. So maybe it was a 30-year loan, but I was already in for 5 years. So there's only 25 years left. So they made it a 40-year mortgage, and they stretched it out for another 40 years. Or sometimes they change the principal. One way they change the principal is simply by taking what you're behind and putting it into a non-interest bearing account. And this is and that non-interest bearing account is not used to calculate what your new mortgage payment will be. But that amount still remains due and owing. And when you finish making your payments, if it's a 40 years, you got to wait 40 years. Well, you still owe them money. There's still a balance out there. And so that's how that generally would work. In 2008, 9, 10, the values of the homes were falling. And so sometimes they would even be what we call the principal reduction, where they would agree to take less, whatever the value of the home was, and rework the mortgage based on the new value of the home. That's not happening very much now as far as I've seen. So anyway, now cut to the chase, foreclosures. Because of these forbearance, but there was a moratorium on foreclosures for some time. So what that meant is, even if you were in foreclosure before COVID, the court did not allow them to move the case forward. And if you fell behind during COVID, you could not, as a mortgage company, file a new case. They would not allow you to file a new case or even move a case along. And so, these cases were delayed 12 months, 18 months, and they're starting to go through now. And I'm starting to see a uptick in some of these old cases that I have, because I still help people with foreclosure, that are in foreclosure. And I'm starting to see a lot of these cases that have been on hold for many, many, many months now moving forward. Some of them, we've worked out a mortgage modification, and sometimes it was pretty good terms, and my clients got to keep their home. Some were still battling, and that's what's going on now. The moratorium's over. The mortgage companies are starting to move forward with foreclosures, and so we're starting to see an uptick in foreclosures. So let's turn to the articles. Okay, so here's the first one. U.S. foreclosures surge in January after end of pandemic freeze. Foreclosures on homes in the U.S. surged in January after a pandemic moratorium ended, though they remained well below pre-COVID levels, according to new data from RealTrack. I don't know, let me just kind of as a side, I think the mortgage companies learned a big lesson in 2008, and that was it wasn't profitable to foreclose on everybody at once. It affects the value of the homes, of everybody's home, and then they get caught with homes where they never get their money back. And so usually I think they learned that it makes sense to try to work something out with the homeowners and try to come up with a payment plan, a loan modification. So that's what I believe that's happening. That's always happened. But the numbers are still very large on the number of people who have missed the mortgage payments. Foreclosure filings such as default notices, scheduled auctions, or bank repossessions jumped 29% from a month earlier and more than doubled compared with January 2021, the report said. Lenders repossessed 4,784 properties in the month and started the process of another 11,854 homes. It's very important to keep these numbers in context. Foreclosure completions are still far below normal levels, less than half as many as in January of 2020, before the pandemic was declared. Well, that's true. What he says when it talks about the completions, because a lot of these cases they didn't let them get a judgment or anything. Here in Illinois, after you get a judgment, the homeowner still has what they call a 3-month redemption period. So the home can't be sold for at least 3 months from the date of that judgment is entered. Well, if the moratorium just ended, the mortgage companies then now have to bring motions in court to get the judgment, and then they have to be heard. So they have to notice it up, and then they have to get in front of a judge, and the judge has to agree. Now, some of these cases, there'll be some objections, and you'll have summary judgment. And that's going to take some months to work through before the foreclosure can come to a completion. So it's not unusual. It doesn't mean that there's not cases in the pipeline to say that, at least here in Illinois. Now, some states are have a much more much quicker process for the mortgage companies to foreclose and take possession of the home. Here in Illinois, we are what they call a judicial state, and that means that it takes time for them to go through. They have to go through and get a judgment and follow the law. Like in some states, I believe California, all they had to do was send out a notice and then foreclose fairly quickly. So anyway, that's when they say about completions. It's kind of a lagging number, so it's not really much to be to hang your hat on about what's really going on. States that saw the greatest number of foreclosure starts in January. So again, here's Illinois, was number 4, and so they're starting, but it's going to take some time. In Illinois, it takes at least 7 months before they can sell your home, and again, many times much longer. He said that after the end of the moratorium, we're likely to continue seeing large year-over-year percentage increases for the rest of this year. Measured against the total number of homes, the state with the highest foreclosure rate is New Jersey, where 1 in every 2,336 housing units has a filing. Nationwide, the ratio is 5,922, so about more than double. The rate in Jersey is more than double. Among large cities, the worst foreclosure rates in January were, and here we go, Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago. January is typically a month, and Chicago has by far the vast majority of foreclosures in the state of Illinois. January is typically a month when foreclosures pick up after a holiday slowdown. This year's rise was amplified by the end of the pandemic freeze. But homeowners have also benefited from a record surge in prices over the past 2 years, which has rescued more than 1 million borrowers from underwater mortgages and made them less vulnerable. Well, this is another thing that we should talk about. If you're facing foreclosure and the value of your home went up, and I just was helping a young lady, this is exactly her situation. She's facing foreclosure. She's been fighting for 2 years to save her home. And even though she hasn't made a payment in for some time, the value of the home has risen to such a point that she can still sell the house and make a profit, or at least break even. And then she doesn't have to worry about a deficiency. So and many of these homes, I had a realtor on my radio show who for the last year has not had a home go more than 5 days on the market. Pretty amazing. And so even in this, now it's after a Super Bowl. That's supposed to be the day. Super Bowl marks the day of the real estate season traditionally, but there has not really been a season because the value of homes is going up because the inventory is so low that even in December, when generally home sales are slower, that the average time on the market was much lower than it's ever been, at least in my experience. And many of the realtors that I talked to, and I talked to quite a few. January is typically, but homeowners have also benefited from a record surge, as I mentioned. So if you're facing this, and your home is, and you're in an area where you could sell the home for a profit at a very quick time, maybe that's something you should think about. Selling at the top of the market and getting what you can out of it. It's not ideal. You'd like to stay in your home, but if the value of the home is going up and you're facing foreclosure, it may be that and a lot of and we could talk about Chapter 13 and how that might help people. But usually, if you have a large arrears, so that means I haven't paid my mortgage in some time and I owe them a lot of money, it makes it very hard to do a Chapter 13 and stay in the home. Without using every dollar that you can scrape together for the next 5 years to pay for it. And I always tell people, do you want to give all the money to your mortgage company, or do you want to help your family? And that's usually a fairly easy decision. But that's sometimes what people have to face. Okay. As well as a moratorium on foreclosures, the government's COVID aid program also included measures to help struggling homeowners delay their loan repayments. And here's the numbers, an estimated 7.1 million borrowers, 14% of all mortgage holders, entered into forbearance during the pandemic, though more than 2/3 of them had exited by March 2021, according to Harvard University's study. Okay, so that's a pretty amazing number there. 14% of all mortgages were in a forbearance agreement at one time. So we're running out of time, but I wanted to kind of just flip through this and show you what's going on. Here's the mortgage. This is Mortgage Daily News. Spike in foreclosure activity, not a surprise. And it's not a surprise. The moratorium's over. Here's in New Jersey. New Jersey allocates $10 million funding for foreclosure prevention. This is from the American Rescue Act, passed last March. They provide a lot of money to cities and states to help people in foreclosure. And so $10 million that came from that fund, they're going to use in New Jersey to help people save their homes. And here's a report from North Carolina. The filings were up 85% from last year. So as you see, it's all over, all over the country that foreclosures are up. Excuse me. And so if you're facing foreclosure, there might be ways, to again, one way, see if you could sell your home. Try to get a loan modification. Fight the foreclosure till you get a loan modification. Sometimes that helps. If you have any questions, you call me. I'm always happy to answer questions about foreclosures, at least here in Illinois. I also am licensed in Tennessee, and so I can answer state-specific questions in those two states, but not other states because I'm not licensed to practice law in those other states. But generally, I can give you general information, not legal information, not legal advice, but general information I can provide. So anyway, that's where we are today. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We are remember that I'm going to ask you to, again, we're kind of getting off on the taxes, but this is important stuff, right? And if you think it's important, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe. You got to let other people know about it. Share it. Let other people know what's out there, and that there are people giving good information away on how we can overcome these problems, tax problems, foreclosure problems, other debt related issues. That's what I help people with. Also, remember, if you're fighting the IRS, the first thing you should do to answer your questions is get a copy of my book. Deal with your IRS problems today. Go to freeirsbook.com. freeirsbook.com. Get a copy of my book. It'll help you. It's the first thing you should do. It'll help you understand what's happening and how you might be able to solve that problem. So thanks so much for joining us here today. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.